My name is Richard Brilliant. I have been a professor of art history and archaeology since 1962 at various institutions, most recently and for many years at Columbia University. I've lived abroad in Italy for several years, and I'm a specialist in many things. Long ago, I decided that I wanted to branch out in my field, and in the interim, since 1962, when my first book was published, and until last October, when my 15th book was published, I have been very busy as a scholar, teacher, researcher, and general interrupter of conventional ideas. I have been married for many years to my same wife since 1951, and I have 4 children, 12 grandchildren, 7 great-grandchildren, and I expect that before long there'll be more great-grandchildren. I write articles and reviews, I still do so, and I am a scholar teacher, and I'm delighted to have that association, that is, teaching and scholarship go together in my mind, and is not to be excused for its absence from one or the other. The contact with students is refreshing because they bring different perspectives. I have had many students over the years, many of whom have become full professors in various institutions. I've been at it a long time. Many of those students have become colleagues and friends over the years, and unfortunately some of those students are no longer alive because I've been at it so long. In a way, I could be characterized as not only an art historian, I do not excavate, but rather as well as a cultural historian, because I'm very much interested in the interaction between the individual, the artist, or I should say among the individual, the artist, and the recipient, that is the visual respondent. I had every childhood disease except diphtheria and polio. I mean everyone. And I also, at the age of 3, developed bronchial asthma, and I'm still an asthmatic. So I would spend long periods of time in bed. The medications were never adequate, and so from the age of 3 onward, where I became a reader, I devoured books, periodicals, materials, and my mother in particular supplied me constantly with books to such a degree that before long I was reading a book a day. The only other reward I had in those years, in addition to making me a reader and interested in scholarship, were 2 things. One is I read encyclopedias, I still do, and I retained the information I read. And the second was I became a Red Sox fan, having grown up in Boston, and one of my great pleasures was going to my first Red Sox game when I was 7 or 8, and a guest of my maternal uncle, and I caught a ball at the stadium, a foul ball, it is true, which I kept for many years and gave to my son to play with, and of course it then disappeared. I'm still a Red Sox fan, although I have not lived in Boston for many years, because it's like a disease in your childhood you don't get rid of. My father was a businessman in Boston. I had no interest in going into family business, 0. And as a result, I felt that I wanted to do something else which was consistent with all those habits of scholarship. In fact, I mentioned before that I used to read encyclopedias, and occasionally I would be asked by my family members, "Oh, what do you know from these encyclopedias?" And I would stand up and give them a lecture. And they used to call me the little professor. Then I wasn't so little any longer, and I became really a professor. So when I finished Latin school, out of my graduating class of 144, 72 went to Harvard University as freshmen. I went to Yale. That may give you some insight about me as well, it probably should. So after I went to Yale, I wanted to decide what was I going to do with myself. I met a number of archaeologists, and I decided that I was not interested in what they were doing. So what could I do instead? I thought I would go to law school, become an attorney, do very well, make a pile of money, and in my 40s, I would retire with a pile of money and be a scholar and do what I have been doing ever since. I was very close to my uncle, my mother's brother, who used to who was an old style, I would say, capitalist buccaneer. He was either very rich or broke, nothing in between. And since he always got very rich from being broke, his creditors always supported him because they knew that he would do well. And I liked him a lot, and he liked me. So in my second year of law school, he said to me, "Richard, what do you plan to do with yourself?" So I said, well, I thought I would practice law, make a lot of money as an attorney, and then retire in my 40s and become a scholar. And he looked at me and he said, if you know now already what you want to do with your life, why do you want to spend 20 years not doing it? Those years will never come again. It was like a harpoon in my chest. It became clear to me in law school that I really should not, and the words of my uncle were very much in my mind, that I ought to go and do something else. In other words, become an art historian. So I went, I applied to 2 institutions, Harvard and Yale. Things were relatively limited in those days. And I decided again I'd go to Yale. And I won fellowships everywhere. And then I got Fulbright grants to go to Europe, because to be an art historian, you have to go look at works of art and think of them in the physical and historical context. Italy was getting over in those days the ravages of the war, which were very intense. Rome was very badly harmed by the war. And in addition, I was very much aware of the presence of fascism and how it had relied on mass culture, mass enthusiasms, just so too, like Hitler in Germany. And that led me to the first book I wrote, which was Gesture and Rank in Roman Art, which is a book of hundreds of illustrations and hundreds of pages. I was very fortunate to be able to publish this. It made my reputation, and it was reviewed at the time over the next 2 or 3 years at least 70 times, and made my career. I have taught contemporary civilization many, many times at Columbia. I'm the only art historian ever to have done so, and with enormous pleasure, because to see students pick up things from their reading and from the questions being asked by their reading and by me in class or by their fellow students, to see them become conscious, sophisticated about their role in society and society's role in them, and what government may be or can be if citizens wish to change it, has been a stimulating experience for me. If I were to characterize my approach to my work, to my career and so forth, I would say there are a few things that are typical. One is a reluctance to accept authority without investigating the principles on which the authority is based. The second is persistence in doing research and trying to find out what things are and how they once were perceived and how I perceive them, and what the scholarly or reporting tradition is like and what it's based on. And the last is a sheer curiosity. I'm extremely curious about why things are the way they are. So that combination of persistence, challenge to authority, and curiosity really have infused my work ever since I started as a scholar. My wife is one. We have known each other since she was 11 and I was 12. We went to summer camp together at 11 and 12. One does not have romance, one has friendship. We have been married now for 66 years, and I guess it's more than friendship. And my legacy will be the books that I have left behind, the kinds of questions I continue to ask, the variety of subjects that I have undertaken, some of which are novel, and in addition, the real effect of the human exchange between me and my students over many, many decades. And that's, I guess, is probably the legacy that I will leave, other than in my own family. Well, the future generations know what a fact is. Be able to present an argument both to yourself and to someone to whom you are addressing your remarks, so that there's a logical discourse of some kind. The argument has a structure, learn how to do this, and that the argument has a point of view which is clearly presented, so they know where you stand and why you stand there, and how to respond to you, if in fact they agree or don't agree with you, so that they have a basis for making a legitimate judgment. I have been quite rigorous about some things, and I have written lots of reviews, some of them complimentary. I try not to be cruel, but some things are really dreadful. And if someone like me doesn't say it, who will? Well, I'm 88. I've lasted a long time.